let's continue with the theme of noise sensitivity and preparing for fireworks season. And in the summer, if you're in the northern hemisphere, in the summer, we have a lot of thunderstorms. So noise sensitive dogs have a lot to put up with in the summertime. So let's have a look at what they actually need from us. What can we do for them? And I have a 3-part action plan for you, so let's get right into it. There. So here's what we're going to cover. First of all, what you need to know and do ahead of time, and a lot of this is covered in the PDF that accompanied the audio for this month's work, but we're going to take a look at it in a little bit more detail here. And then what you need to watch out for, looking at the dog's body language, making preparations when it comes to taking the dog out for necessary potty walks or having visitors in and so forth. So that there are things that you need to plan ahead for, so that you're not thinking after the fact, I wish I had planned for that. And then finally, appropriate action steps that you can take right now. So let's first ask what noise sensitivity actually is. It's an automatic response from the autonomic nervous system that tells the individual, dog or human, that a certain sound, a certain noise is threatening or dangerous or to be avoided somehow. So that leads to a feeling of fear or being startled if it's unexpected and then not recovering from the startle. So any kind of environmental noises, whether it comes from just things that happen in the environment, whether it's nature, or whether it's things that people are doing or saying, anything that the dog responds to with fear is a source of noise anxiety or noise sensitivity. And an animal that is severely fearful, can't recover, is noise phobic. And that's the problem with a lot of sensitivity across the board, but especially with noise sensitivity. If it's unpredictable noise like fireworks, then it's very hard for a dog to just get used to it and get over it. It just doesn't work that way with the nervous system. So these are some numbers that might kind of surprise you a little bit. I know that they made me open up my eyes and pay attention. When owners were questioned about their dog's behavior and responses, 57% of owners said that their dogs suffer from some form of anxiety, and that's only the reported ones. But that's still a pretty huge number. 57% suffer from some form of anxiety, and 40% of dogs fear noise. So it is common, and it is a concern. 40% of individuals in any population suffering from a certain condition, that is a huge cause for concern. And many dogs also fear being alone, separation anxiety, but noise anxiety is a lot more common even than separation anxiety, and dogs that are afraid of other dogs or afraid of people. So why are noises so distressing for dogs? Well, first of all, they can cause pain to a dog's sensitive hearing. An exceptionally loud noise, and we can all think about noises that we really can't tolerate, especially if they persist and go on and on and on. It might be a certain high-pitched sound. It might be something else. But I think we all can think of something that we really grates on our nervous system that we don't want to hear. And for dogs, a lot of the things that are part of our everyday life can be really disruptive to dogs because their hearing is so much more sensitive, like doorbells. We know that dogs frequently have an over-aroused reaction to the doorbell ringing. They'll rush at the door and bark and bark and bark. And that, that's a complex thing. It isn't the doorbell alone, although the noise of the doorbell could be disturbing to them, but it's what the doorbell predicts that is, has a lot to do with their reaction. But then we have microwaves that beep, and we have smoke detectors. If the battery is low and there's a beeping noise that just goes on and on and on, a blender or a mixer, even a washing machine or dryer with, that constant noise. For us, it doesn't sound like anything that's so dramatic, and yet for some dogs, the sound of a washing machine, that, the water sloshing back and forth, could be disruptive to them. Why? We don't know. We may never know, because that is part of the dog's internal automatic response. It could be that it's physically disturbing. It could trigger an unpleasant memory. There could be a lot of reasons. But the good news is that no matter what the reason is, the way we manage it is going to be the same. Okay. Things like children screaming or vacuum cleaners, insect zappers, the garbage truck backup beeping, or construction, thunder, fireworks, and gunshots. All of those things can be highly disruptive for our dogs. And when our dog is starting to have that anxiety response, you will recognize body language signals. And in order to recognize the body language signals that predict distress, you need to also be familiar with what your dog looks like, what his body looks like, what his expression looks like when he's calm and relaxed. Because then you can recognize when things start to change. So you might notice that the dog is pacing a little bit more. Instead of relaxing, he's restless. Or excessive panting with a wide and extended tongue and salivation. Dog drooling with a wide mouth. The corners of the mouth in this situation are usually pulled pretty far back, and we can see like the wrinkles at the corner because the dogs have really, it kind of looks like a smile, but it doesn't represent any happy feeling that the dog is having. Sweaty paws. We sweat if we're anxious or nervous, and dogs perspire from their tongue and from the pads of their feet. They don't have sweat glands on their body. So their cooling mechanism is panting. And if you see wet footprints from your dog, and the dog hasn't been walking in water, you'll know that he has sweaty paws, and that's a sign of distress. So you need to take some kind of action if you see that. Dogs, lower their body posture. They'll cringe. They'll lower their heads. They'll be very jumpy. The least little thing will startle them. They may shake or tremble. And what 52% of dogs do is hide. And if you have a noise-sensitive dog that wants to hide, by all means, let the dog hide. We think that we're doing the dog a service if we coax him to come out of his hiding place because we're thinking we want him to see that everything is okay. From your perspective, through the lens that you are viewing the situation, everything is okay. But the dog is looking at things through a completely different lens, and he doesn't think everything is okay. And if you coax him to come out in that, according to his perception, unsafe place, it's going to make him worse. Right? Makes sense. So a dog that is hiding should be allowed to hide. That is their coping mechanism, and we shouldn't interfere with it. We're not doing him any favors if we do that. And then other things, stiff muscles, lip licking, tongue flicks, and these things happen really fast. If you look away from the dog for a second, or even if you blink, you might miss these things. So you have to be very tuned in, very observant and attentive to what the dog is doing. Shaking off, vocalizing. So it could be whining, whimpering, growling, barking, anything that is an unusual kind of vocalizing for the dog. Shaking off, turning away, and then trying to escape. And this is why the escape-proof safe haven that you have created for your dog, and you make sure that he doesn't have the opportunity to dart out an open door. And some dogs will even jump through a window. So you need to, one of the things that I usually recommend is that you cover windows. Now, you might already have a window cover. There might be blinds that you could close or drapes that you can draw, things like that. But the windows should in some way be covered so they're not as obvious to the dog that they're there and a potential escape route if they get panicked. And certainly the windows should not be left open. And then we have destructive chewing, scratching, and digging. Again, that's a huge percentage of dogs that do that. Why do they do it? Because they're trying to escape. And we need to look at the dog's body, look at ears, eyes, head, mouth, and tail. And going into a detailed description of what to look for and all of that is another whole topic. It's a huge topic that I cover in depth inside of my programs. So fear behaviors that are often associated with noise anxiety. And what that means is that dogs that have noise anxiety often demonstrate other forms of anxiety as well, even though they seemingly don't have anything to do with noise. So fear of surfaces and fear of heights. And compulsive behaviors. We want to be really diligent about observing anything that might become a compulsive behavior in our dogs. Because compulsive behaviors are things that dogs do repetitively, almost in a loop that they almost can't get out of. And the behaviors don't have any purpose. They don't solve any need except for that abnormal need to keep repeating the same thing. It's almost like an addiction, like obsessive compulsive behaviors. Things like tail chasing, which is a common one. shadow chasing, trying to bite at shadows, obsessed with, light on a wall. So if, a certain time of day, light comes in a certain window and is on, a wall, that could be disruptive to a dog, and that could lead to compulsive behaviors. But we certainly don't want to encourage things like tail chasing, and it's a huge mistake to think, oh, isn't that cute? That's funny that the dog is chasing his tail. It's not. And we should really interrupt that if it happens. Interrupt it and give the dog an alternative behavior that he can immediately do, something that is more interesting, more attractive. And if you're unable to interrupt it, then that's a serious situation. And that's when you need to go to your veterinarian and maybe work with a behaviorist on that. That's a serious problem. So, separation anxiety is often related to noise anxiety, and then fear of people and dogs, fear of traveling, fear of going to new places, fear of novel experiences. And then dogs can become hyperactive, hypervigilant, inattentive, unable to focus on anything, just highly distracted all the time, which leads to impulsive behaviors, because if they're distracted a lot, then they're not going to be aware of what they're doing next, because they're not thinking about it. And so behaviors become impulsive. And then we have what we call displacement behaviors, which are things that dogs do in order to avoid the thing that's bothering them. So things like scratching, yawning, licking their paws, or stretching sometimes, all of these things that are, a lot of these things are harmless in and of themselves. But if they are displacement behaviors, then you have to ask, what is the dog avoiding and why? Okay, so influences on noise anxiety. This is important to know because we want the dog to be less anxious about noise, and there are absolutely things that we can do to help noise anxious dogs. Without a doubt, there are plenty of things. Can you completely cure it? Well, that's a different question. And in my opinion, no. If it's there, it's going to be there. And one of the reasons I say that is because one of the most common causes or influences on noise anxiety is genetics. Noise anxious dogs tend to have offspring that have that same behavior. And then it could be early life trauma as well. And trauma, it changes the brain permanently. It doesn't mean that we can't help dogs that have early life trauma. We absolutely can. We can show them that they have other choices. They don't have to allow themselves to be overcome and overwhelmed by re-experiencing that trauma. Maternal influence, not exactly the same as genetics. If the mother shows a lot of fear, the puppies are going to tend to mirror the mother's behaviors. And then a traumatic event of some kind, if it's perceived as traumatic by the dog, then it's traumatic, no matter what we think of it. But some things that happen to dogs, especially during fireworks, like a sudden firework suddenly going off close to the dog, that's obviously very traumatic. And some dogs take a long, long time to get over that. And they don't ever really get over it. What they do is learn how to cope with it. And that's what we teach our dogs that have gone through traumatic experiences. We know that trauma isn't something that you're going to just eliminate. It doesn't happen. So what we do is teach the dogs, and we show them that they have other choices. So we don't make those choices for them. We create opportunities for them so that they can make a healthy choice and then discover that it's easy to make that choice. Punitive training can definitely be an influence on noise anxiety. I remember years ago when I was working with service dogs, there was a young dog going through the program who was about to be washed out of the program because he was so noise sensitive. And I had occasion to speak with someone who had fostered that dog as a puppy. And I mentioned that the dog was noise sensitive, and the person said to me, well, I'm really surprised to hear that, because when that puppy was with me, I made sure that I made a lot of noise. I would slam doors, drop loud things, I would smash things, I would make a lot of noises to make that dog get used to loud noises. And of course, what happened was that the dog was traumatized by those loud noises. That, of course, is not the way to help a dog accept noise. I'm trying to find a good way to say it. A very poor choice of actions on the part of that foster. So that, of course, health can make a dog much more sensitive, and age. I had a dog that was never reacted at all to thunderstorms. But when he got older, when he got to be like 11, 12 years old, he became very frightened of thunderstorms. And for him, the thing that really helped him a lot was the thunder shirt. And, they don't work the same way for all dogs. But in his case, it really was the thing that helped him. He would go from shaking and trembling to just completely relaxed, ready to take a nap, because of the pressure of the thunder shirt. And then inadequate caregiver responsiveness. So that might be, the guy that was slamming doors for the puppy. Not only inadequate, but incompetent caregiver responsiveness. And lack of mental and physical stimulation. Dogs need it at their very early developmental period. They need mental and physical stimulation. They need to be in situations where they're experiencing novelty in a safe, friendly, trusting, supportive environment, so they can learn that new things aren't scary. But if they don't have that experience during that primary developmental period, which is up to approximately 4 months, then it's very, very hard for them to learn that later in life. They can. It's not that they can't, but it takes longer, and it's a little harder for them because they have to overcome that anxiety that they learned. Okay. So for this we have a 3-part action plan. Prepare, observe, and respond. So let's take a look at it. For preparation, you want your safe haven, you want it ready, you want the dog to be used to it, you want the dog to spend time there. Make sure that it's secure, that it's comfortable. Interior rooms are best. Even if you have a great big closet, that would be great. I mean, a big, huge closet, like a walk-in closet. But if not, a room, preferably interior, but if that isn't possible, then remember what I said a minute ago about windows and doors. And then the dog should be able to safely exit into that room. In other words, leave the scary environment. So if he's out with the family and fireworks starts, the dog should understand that he can freely exit the situation that is becoming overwhelming for him and go into his room. So he should safely exit the stress and go into his comfortable, safe place. Okay. So to prepare, whoops. All right, so here are the things that you need to make sure that you've got ready for your preparation. A safe collar that the dog won't slip out of with some kind of ID, up-to-date ID. Microchip that's up-to-date. If you have changed any of that contact information since the dog was originally microchipped, then you need to get that updated. Make sure you have current photos of your dog. Some kind of noise deadening device like a white noise machine or calming music. YouTube has a ton of videos that you can play, and some of them are hours long, and they are specifically for calming dogs. So if you do a search on YouTube, you can find tons of them. And then box fans. Box fans are like white noise. And they also keep the noise circulating in the room so that it isn't just located to one spot. So if you have music or a white noise machine, those are great, but the farther away you get from it, the less you hear. But with a fan, the noise travels on the air currents throughout the room. Make sure there's extra bedding in case the dog wants to burrow under a blanket and feel safe. Make sure everything is comfortable in the room, the temperature, the surroundings, the place where the dog can go to hide. There are hiding places like maybe inside a closet or under a bed or behind a piece of furniture. Wherever the dog wants to go to hide is okay. Let the dog choose, and then let him decide when he wants to come out. That's his choice. And then your voice. Your voice is one of your most powerful tools, and we don't use it nearly as much as we could to get the most advantage out of it. So when you speak to your dog, speak from a place of compassion, without judgment. Speak from your heart, and tell the dog the kinds of things that you would tell a child who was maybe afraid of the dark. You wouldn't say there's nothing to be afraid of, because the child doesn't believe that. And the child's going to say, no, you're not telling me the truth. And you wouldn't be. You would not be telling the child his truth or her truth. So we have to recognize the emotional truth of the dog and simply acknowledge that I hear you, I understand, don't worry, I'm here with you. So soft, comforting voice. And then things that the dog might enjoy, like chew toys or treats or puzzles, things that the dog can, if he's not very hyper aroused, then he can maybe engage in some of those things. So when we observe our dogs, we want to acknowledge that, because they need to be heard, just saying, in whatever words you want to use, but the meaning of it is, I hear you. And then to appreciate it, dogs need to be understood. So it's not just that I hear you, I get it. I understand. And that's without denying or dismissing the dog, like not saying, oh, don't worry, it's really nothing, it's not going to hurt you, don't be silly. That isn't compassionate. because that's not acknowledging the dog's real need. And then you meet your dog where he is without judgment. Don't think that, my dog is afraid of noise and something must be wrong with him because he's afraid of noise. So we don't judge, because what judgment does is it creates distance between you and your dog, and it creates resistance, because your opinion is over here and their truth is way over there. So you have to go and meet the dog where he is and then work with him there and lead him forward. You can't lead him from a distance. And then we acknowledge that we acknowledge the dog's emotion with calming words. I see how afraid you are. I'm right here. We appreciate the truth of the dog's anxiety. I can see that this is causing you distress. And then we accept the truth of the dog's emotional state right now. I understand and I believe you. I believe that this is bothering you. And you just sit with the dog and accept it. It doesn't mean that you don't take action to help that dog. You absolutely do. But in the moment when the dog is afraid, that's not a moment where you can show the dog that he has other options. That has to be done at a time when the dog is calm. And then responsiveness. When you respond, you're going to do something. This is where you take action to help the dog. You're going to accommodate the dog's needs, adjust the environment to build a sense of safety. You're going to ask what the dog wants to do. If you want to go, do you want to go and hide under the bed? That's fine. Go ahead and do that. If that makes you feel good right now, then you go ahead and do that, if that makes you safe. And then when we do that, we acknowledge the dog's agency, because free choice empowers confidence and resilience. Dogs must know that they have control over their well-being, just like we need to know that. So part of accommodation is also getting distance from the trigger, and I think most people understand that you want to get that distance, you want to create that distance as your first line of defense. The very first thing that you do is get distance away from the trigger. And then you ask the dog what he needs. How can I meet your urgent need? And then agency is freedom to control one's well-being, essential for self-regulation and resilience. And movement is key. Do not immobilize a frightened animal, because his nervous system is requiring him to move. Mobilization is part of the fear response. That's how an animal copes with fear, with mobilization. So keep him moving. And then finally, advocacy. Speak up and stand up on your dog's behalf. Don't let anyone interfere with your dog's well-being, even though they may have good intentions. Oh, can I pet your dog? And the dog is timidly backing away, getting behind you, looking away, and saying with his body, no, no, no. You need to be your dog's advocate. And, you just need to say, oh, this isn't a good time, or my dog needs space right now. But one thing I urge you never to do, and that is to say anything deprecating about your dog. Just say, things like, oh, my dog is afraid of people. My dog doesn't like people. My dog is shy. Watch out, my dog might bite you. Things like that. Those are very bad vibes to send to your dog. Really bad. So don't do that. And then this list, again, I could spend a lot of time on this, but this list is worth paying a lot of attention to. Responsive parenting, being attuned, attentive, compassionate, proactive, clear, and kind. A lot to unpack with that. And then finally, stop telling your sensitive dog what to do, because when they're in that reactive, sensitive, fight or flight state of mind, they can't follow instructions, because that takes thinking and a higher executive function. And when an animal is frightened, that part of the brain is shut down. Same thing happens with people, because the dog's survival system is constructed in such a way that when your life is threatened, all of your energies are going to be directed towards survival. You don't need to think and solve problems. You don't need to think about, should I run away from the saber-toothed tiger or should I stand here? That's not a decision. So the immediate, the instantaneous, automatic response is the survival mechanism. Fight or flight, run away, or feign death. And that's another thing that animals do that I like to talk about in my classes. It's so interesting because it shows us that animals in nature, their nervous systems function the way they were designed to function, because they don't have all of this interference from humans, trying to fix them and make them better, and we really only kind of mess them up a little bit. That's another topic for discussion. So instead of telling your sensitive dog to do what makes your sensitive dog feel safe. So to sum it up, we want to prepare, observe, respond. And that's it for this. So thank you very much for being here. Any questions, you can head over to my website, which the link is right there, and there's a contact form there. You can shoot me a question if there's anything that that you're wondering about or that you think you need help with. Okay, thanks for listening, and that's it for now. Take care of your dogs this coming fireworks season. They're counting on you.